Also, I just realized I'm rolling by you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to another episode of the Level Up Hour with the one and only, the illustrious Langdon White. Today, we're joined by the marvelous and well-traveled Scott McCarty. We were discussing where he lives versus where I live prior to the show. So, welcome, Scott. Welcome, Langdon, to the channel. Langdon, do you want to kind of go through our normal rigmarole, or let Scott
Yeah.
introduce himself first?
Um, let's do the normal rigmarole and then we'll do the introductions so I can
Okay.
give a little bit of context. So I will share my awesome slides,
Your
which
slides are awesome.
Scott has been on the show before, and so
Yes.
I'm sure he appreciates seeing these brilliant slides again. Because I'm sure everyone does. So this is the Level Up Hour where we talk about why containers rock and why you might want to start using them. And we're trying to convince you. And then we've actually been doing a lot of interviewing of people about kind of the ins and outs of containers and about how they get deployed and the kind of the architecture for that. We also tend to talk about OpenShift as well. We are on the OpenShift TV channel, and how it relates to, kind of using containers natively on the operating system. So that's the Level Up Hour. Check out our website at red.ht/leveluphour, and you can also find cool things like discounts on training and discounts on licensing. And if you want to get more into Podman, for example, you can always go download Fedora, but you can also now get Red Hat REL production subscriptions through a developer subscription. I think it's up to 16 that you can run yourself. So you can definitely play with everything that we're talking about here. If you have any trouble trying to play with those things, let us know and we will help you solve them. And speaking of which, you can find myself and Chris on Twitter. I'm Langdon with a 1, and Chris Short is Chris Short. And speaking of Mr. McCarty here, he is Father Linux on Twitter. So you can go check out his Twitter feed and all his millions of followers. But if you want to chat with us, with more kind of long form chatting, I guess, we also have a Discord that you can check us out on, where there is sometimes some active discussion around the various shows, including the Level Up Hour, but also like the gaming show that we do.
Which is later today, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, is it today? Okay.
Yeah. Today at 2 Eastern, 1800 UTC. So
cool. So check that out. We usually do a recap of everything that's coming up for the day at the end of the show, so we'll probably cover it again. So more details later. So today we're going to talk about UBI. We have talked about UBI on the show before, and as we were joking around earlier, this is not a universal basic income, but instead a base container image that uses Red Hat provided software, but in the idea being that you can kind of have a redistributable container for all the things you might want to build, rather than the things that Red Hat wants to build and ship. Also have show notes from last time. So before I move on, let me just kind of say, so we're going to talk more in depth about what the UBI is like internally, rather than how to use it, which is more what we normally cover on the show. Sorry, Chris, did you have a question?
No, I just said I was dropping the links for you.
Oh, cool. Thanks. I actually have them nicely copied over somewhere so that I could do that too. But so I got the show notes done for the episode before last and last episode. Those were interesting topics, particularly the Podman v3 kind of deep dive. We had one of the architects of the Podman project on the show, Brent Bowdy, and he's always a lot of fun. I think it was really successful. I think it was really popular, and I think we had a lot of good questions. So we may even twist his arm and bring him back to talk about the show, or talk about Podman some more. Yeah. And then last time we were supposed to talk more about Docker Compose, but ended up talking a lot about the differences between deploying something for OpenShift versus deploying something in Podman. So we're going to do more with Docker Compose and Podman in a future episode in a couple of weeks. I have a lot of intro today. So next week, next week,
coming up next week, yes,
we are going to have Chris Wright, CTO of Red Hat, on the show, and we're going to be talking about some of the kind of like future ideas around Kubernetes and like how to maybe kind of wrap how you think about Kubernetes around a little bit. It's not just a way to deploy software necessarily, and we want to get into that a little bit. Primarily driven from a show he did, like a quick hit show called Technically Speaking, with he and Kelsey Hightower, that they did. They recorded a couple of weeks ago, but it will be also dropping during the show. So we're going to feature that and talk with him about that. Hopefully, we'll also talk about what's coming up at Red Hat Summit, which is the following week, and KubeCon EU, which is the week after that, and what he's really interested in going to see, and what, as hopefully by extension, you might be interested in as well. Please remember, we are running a contest. We've decided we're going to try to extend it a little bit. If you want to go to KubeCon EU, please share somewhere on the social media about what you have learned on the show, and then come and bring us a link to it on our Discord, so that we can enter you into a raffle for free tickets to both Red Hat Summit and KubeCon EU. Except the Red Hat Summit ones, everyone is free, so everybody on the show gets a ticket.
About to say, wait, what?
So I'm going to take complete credit for you get a free ticket to Red Hat Summit. So does everyone else. But the KubeCon EU does have a decent sized fee, and so we would like to give out some free tickets to that. Whew, that was a lot. All right. So Scott McCarty, let me stop sharing. Would you care to introduce yourself as to what you do at Red Hat?
Sure. So I finally had a chance to watch your episode with Brent Bodie, who's on our team, and so I work with Brent a lot. I am a product manager for Podman, Builda, Scopio, Cryo, and Red Hat Universal Base Image. So basically, all of these pieces, parts that are in OpenShift and REL.
All the fun stuff.
All the fun stuff. But the funny part about UBI is it touches literally everything in the world. And so I get every question on the planet, from like security stuff to like, when is OpenSSL getting updated? I'm like, I don't know. That's a different team. I literally had one about Python this morning. They're like, you do UBI? What's going on with Python? I'm like, don't know. Like, I don't run all of REL. Like,
right,
you don't.
Like, this is insane.
You're not the whole REL team, Scott.
Yeah, well, not only is it all the like bits that go into UBI, right, but it's also like it is a significantly different distribution model for like any of our software. So we were first trying to get UBI out the door, like that was a train wreck through our like.
It's really hard to give free software away at Red Hat.
Yes, it is. Weirdly enough. Yeah, and just even building it right is a non-trivial exercise.
I became an amateur lawyer. I became an amateur, basically everything. Export compliance, open source compliance. I dealt with everything with launching UBI. Yeah, I launched UBI too. So at least the good news is I know it all really well. But it gets literally any question at Red Hat could somehow come to UBI. Like if you're using a container, basically. So they're always like, well, how do I do this? What do I do with this? What's the legal? Can I redistribute this? What happens if I add this package?
Right. So when can I get Podman inside UBI?
Actually, that's that. We have tech preview bits of that today that are on.
Oh, wow.
The container
really?
catalog, if you look. Yep. And it remained tech preview for 2 releases, and we'll end up GAing it. Dan Walsh ended up I finally roped him into getting interested in it, paying attention to it more. And we have all kinds of, so it was hard for me to educate people why we want that. Like everyone's like, why do we want that? Why don't they just use Podman? I'm like, well, let me give you some crazy ideas. So I'm a sysadmin and I need to run this version of Podman, and I'm not allowed to install it on the system because we certify on REL 8.2. Okay, well now I can use a Podman container and get the version from 8.4, which is 3.0, running on my 8.2 system. I don't break any of the compliance stuff at my company, and I still get to use the new version of Podman. Right. Containers are awesome.
It's funny because we talk about application containers on the show a lot. And I don't think they get anywhere near the, kind of marketing push or whatever that they should. I mean, it's so much easier to run whatever, gnarly thing that you want to using a container. We actually opened like this, we started the series of the show really about like how do you build an application container that kind of contains all the tools that you want to use, and then ship it around your data center and have it kind of wherever you want it, so that you don't have to muck with the systems that are running real stuff.
Let's give you the even crazier one. So we had a problem where a partner of ours was running REL 7 and they were locked into REL 7 for a hardware solution that they're delivering. And they're like, but we need Podman 3.0 or whatever, Podman 2.2. It has some bug, blah, blah, blah. 1.64 that we released. That's the last, REL 7 is in the sunset now. I mean, like the sun is setting, the sun is still over the horizon, and we do CVEs and that's about it. And it's very stable, but like Podman, people always want the latest, greatest version. So they're like, hey, we need 2.2.3. And I'm like, nah, ain't gonna happen. Like, we cannot update that ever again. The REL program will kill me. Like, they do not let me do this. And so I was like, but we do support REL 8 containers on REL 7. Like, we do support that at tier 2. So let's bring a Podman container back and run Podman in a container using the version of Podman that's there, but you still get the newer features that you need for this thing. That's a pretty killer, like, that truly unblocked a serious cluster fire problem I had, like, where I'm like, I don't know how to support this.
That is like such a mind-blowing concept, right? Like, that is awesome, right?
It's awesome, right? Like, it unblocks people so they can do what they need to do, which is like the agile way of thinking, right? Like, how can I unblock these people to do what they need to do? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
I dropped the link in chat to the tech preview Podman.
Oh, cool.
So feel free to kick the tires on it. Field questions in Discord. We can get them back to Scott and company so they can get it.
One thing I will plug the alternate route there with kind of REL 8 and beyond, right? Is that this is actually the goal of something like AppStreams, right? Is also part of trying to solve that same problem. And when we were developing that project, we often refer to the too fast, too slow problem. So we have customer A, right, who says, I need the latest version of Podman. Oh, but don't change anything else, right? But then at the same time, you have someone else who's like, oh, my entire infrastructure is working on Podman, ancient, right, or whatever. But I need new hardware. So, please, use the older version of Podman on the latest version of things.
Yeah.
So I think when you're coming from the perspective of a kind of a single customer or a single user, you always have a complaint, and depending on the current perspective of wherever you're at or whatever you're doing, it's that all of RHEL or Linux or whatever is moving too fast, or vice versa, it's all moving too slowly. And I think when you look at it in aggregate, you start to realize, that everybody has a problem with the speed of something. And so that's actually the genesis of the AppStream stuff. It was concurrent with the work around containers. And I think now we have two really nice ways of approaching that problem that can work independently as well as together to try to give you that too fast, too slow solution across, basically our platform, right? Which I think is super interesting. But moving on,
just talk about one last thing back to UBI. Builda and Scopia will drop in UBI in REL 8.4, and then the plan is to add Podman in REL 8.5. So there's a Podman image today that's tech preview, but you have to have a REL subscription and you have to authenticate to grab it. But like when REL 8.4 drops here in a few weeks, you'll see Builda and Scopia, and those are fully supported on REL, but they're also GA'd. So now we're adding them to UBI, so they'll be freely redistributable. And then we're doing the same thing with Podman in 8.5 is kind of the plan right now.
So just for clarification, you need to register and download it, but you should be able to do that with a developer subscription, which is no cost. So it is accessible for, without paying money. It's just that it's not accessible without kind of agreeing to the T's and C's at the moment. That brings up a really good point. We actually had the question with Brent, but we were joking around about how we never actually know when anything's going to release. So it's nice to have product managers on occasionally who are like, oh yeah, here is exactly when this is going to happen. So it's good to hear. So 8.4 is the target for basically the new versions of Podman, which is awesome. And then you were saying 8.5 is when the container version of Podman?
technically today, even in REL 8.3 is when we released a Podman container. To be honest with you, I wasn't happy with the UX of it. I think the UX is a little funky. You still have to run it as a privileged container, which is fine. But you have to run it as -- privilege. We are working on, like, Dan, especially this week, I know he's been working on all kinds of different ways you can run it. And we're looking at like what modifications we can make in the container image to make it easier to use, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we're looking at improving the UX over the next dot release so that, like, when we release it in REL, we're going to GA Podman in a container on REL in 8.5 is the plan. And then when we GA it, so I have this rule, I don't release anything into UBI unless it's GA. So like, that's why Build and Scopy are dropping in UBI in 8.4, because those container images are already GA. And then when Podman GAs in a container, as in the UX is good, I feel like it passes all the sniff tests, like QE is good, our docs are good, then we GA it, and then it'll drop in UBI, so it'll be, like you said, redistributable without a subscription.
And just
you can test it today.
For anybody who's new to the show, so Podman, as we jokingly refer to, is often referred to as a wrapper.
Yes.
And so it's Podman the wrapper, which we still don't have T-shirts for.
No, I have a T-shirt for it. You don't.
I don't have a T-shirt for it. That's true. But so Build is kind of the build component of Podman. Scopio is kind of the search and kind of delivery side of Podman.
It's the paring knife. Yeah, I call it the chef's knife, paring knife, and hibachi knife.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So Podman is kind of the experience for the overall set of things that you need to do with containers. But if you want to do, like, build a CI engine, for example, you might want to just include Builda, for example, because you don't need all of Podman. You just want the build infrastructure. So that's why it's kind of built in the Unix philosophy of, each tool does a job, but then sometimes you want to wrap those together to give you a full experience. So we had a question come up in the chat.
We have a couple questions.
We had a couple of questions. I was going to go off and talk about UBI versus UBI minimal versus the REL image, but is there another question we should answer before that's quicker than that?
I mean, there is some confusion, right? Like, I want to acknowledge that Plain Risky's question, I think, is worth addressing early, right, so we can eliminate confusion. So
that's what I was going to kind of go to Scott is like, okay, so if I go and look for a base image from Red Hat, let's ignore, for the sake of argument, the kind of the strongly built images, so like the ones that already have Apache and PHP and all that jazz, right? Instead, let's just talk about kind of the more basic ones. So we have, to the best of my knowledge right now, we have UBI minimal, there's a UBI micro, I think, in the works, and then there's like a UBI, and then there's also like a REL image. What's the difference? Or like, are they all things that we expect to continue like forever? Is there a recommendation around which one we choose under some conditions, or should we always be choosing UBI or UBI minimal and getting away from REL images?
Yeah. So in REL, how to word this? So in REL 7, let's start with the history. So in REL 7, we had that the end user license agreement was only the REL end user license agreement, which back in the day, the way you would install software was we delivered industrial grade flour, industrial grade sugar, industrial grade, water, like in big bins, bags, and boxes and barrels to our customers. And then they mixed it all together and they made cakes at scale, right? Like that's what we sold, enterprise software. And so it was really fine when the sysadmin, architects, and developers all mixed a cake on premise in a data center or a shared, blah, blah, blah. That's how our original entitlement model was based around all of that. Like, we would sell the company a subscription and then they could use whatever they wanted in that industrial data center, or whatever they bought, whatever subscriptions they could use it. But they were not allowed to redistribute it because it's free software, it's open source, and they're allowed to, but contractually they would agree not to, is how I should say it. And that was just so that we could get them to, we could come up with a monetization model where we could actually make money and actually, sell them something so that we could make money and keep building free software. But technically what people don't realize is, like, if you don't have a REL agreement, if you don't sign the Red Hat enterprise license agreement, you can redistribute REL all you want. Like, there's nothing, like, you're not breaking any laws, right? Like, it's a contractual agreement that businesses make with each other. And it basically says, we'll give you support as long as you pay us for the copies that you install. And it was just the only way we could come up with in the United States and the world with a legal framework that would actually make this work, right? Like, you have to have some these locks keep honest people honest, and that's all this is. This is like a legal agreement to keep honest people honest. Now that said, that breaks down when you get into containers. And when we released Docker and RHEL 7, we still had the container images protected by the exact same end user license agreement as the bits for the servers. And so we had customers that couldn't, they would create a container image with RHEL 7, and then they would go to redistribute it to their friends and be like, oh, I'm not allowed to do that. Like I contractually, I'm not supposed to do that. And it took us a while to figure out how to do this in a way that made sense. And so when we launched RHEL 8, we came up with this concept of UBI, which is really just a UA, to be honest with you. It's a different end user license agreement. It is not actually different bits, although people perceive it as that because it's just how human brains work. But it's actually nothing more than a different end user license agreement that allows people to redistribute the set of content that is in UBI, which is a subset of RHEL. And it's not other things at Red Hat. It's not layered products. It's not OpenShift. It is OpenShift because OpenShift comes with RHEL, but it comes from RHEL. It's always a subset of RHEL. Now, that said, there are 3 UBI base images. I manage the base images. Other people manage the layered ones like Python and Ruby. Actually, Brian Gallagher manages Ruby and Python and all the layered ones that are like programming languages. And actually, other people manage other ones, like because there's a bunch of different subsystem teams in RHEL. So like, I will specifically talk about the base images, even though I know how all the others, they all fall under that same UBI EULA. So they're all UBI in people's minds, but they're really just RHEL released under a different end user license agreement. Now, that said, there are 3 base images today. There is minimal, standard, and the one that has system D in it. We call it the init, and we call it the Cadillac image. Like, that's the one that you just do a yum install, systemctl enable Apache, or HTTPD, and things just work like magic habits. You treat the init image like a VM if you're like kind of bringing stuff along from the old world. The standard one we had targeted for 80% of use cases. So it works just like a regular RHEL system where you do a yum install, HTTPD, things work. If you're in a Docker file or whatever, container file. The minimal has something called micro DNF, which pulls in less dependencies and can, in some cases, make an image smaller. Like it'll trim out a few megabytes. I think it's like 100. I forget what the latest version in RHEL 8 is, but call it 110-ish megabytes. And then the standard is about, or maybe it's about 130 megabytes. The standard is about 205-ish. And then the init is about like 208-ish. It adds another couple megabytes for the few things we had for system D. Those are the 3 ones today. Now, being honest, 80% of the users end up just seeing UBI minimal and just going for that. And then what happens is a lot of times they'll add packages. Sometimes it even ends up adding regular yum because yum yum/DNF gets pulled in as a dependency. And so it ends up having micro DNF and DNF. And, and next thing you know, the image is
seems
actually
like it defeats the
bigger
point.
than, no, it ends up being bigger than the regular standard image. And it's counterintuitive, but it's what happens. It still doesn't matter. I look at our download numbers. 80% of the people are using UBI minimal. Or at least 80% of the automated builds that are probably driving this are. Now in RHEL 8.4, we're adding one more. We're adding UBI micro. UBI micro is special. It is actually truly different than the other ones. It has no yum and DNF installed. It has no RPM command. It has nothing. You can fire it up and you'll be like, oh, this is cool. I can run bash. What the do I do with this now? Like, I don't understand what this is for. The reason why, because most people will try to use it in a Docker file and it will fail. You cannot build it with a Docker file. Not yet. I'm working on some really cool, tricky stuff with Podman to make this super elegant, but that'll probably be more like RHEL 8.5 as a sneak preview. But RHEL 8.4, when it comes out, you'll have to use builda. You will use the yum, /DNF in RHEL 8.4 on the host to then like do the -o, install into a directory, and you'll like basically install into a mounted UBI, and then you will create another layer, and then you will commit that layer. But the beauty of this is this has 3 beautiful things. Like, you're using trusted RHEL content, so the quality of the content is really good. You are not adding new packages into your environment that are not already part of RHEL, so you're not expanding your attack, footprint, attack surface. Because if you already have these packages on a RHEL host somewhere, somebody can theoretically attack these. You're just adding the exact same packages that are on a RHEL host into the container image. So you're basically keeping the environment minimal, the total permutation set of packages that you have in your environment. And then third, the actual individual container image is pretty damn tiny. We can get it down, like a base image right now is like 12.9 megabytes compressed. Whoa. And about 38 megabytes uncompressed. And then we can build, we've done some tests with OpenSSL. We can get like 80 megabyte OpenSSL image. We can get like 120 megabyte Apache image, about 120 megabyte Nginx image. And right now you'll have to build those today, but I am working on a roadmap where we'll sort of have a UBI micro family of container images where we'll have like a pre-built OpenSSL one, a pre-built Apache one, a pre-built Nginx one. You just grab these tiny images. Now, again, you're going to have to use them with Builda or once it already has the app in it, like say you just want to use Apache, you may be able to use a copy, just copy some, like a web root in and do some of that. You may be able to consume some of those without having to muck with them. But the UBI micro that's coming out in RHEL 8, you'll have to use Builda to add anything to it.
But I mean, like if you're doing an Apache or whatever, wouldn't you bind mount the content anyway? I mean,
a lot of the time. Yeah. Most of the time. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I guess I don't know. So what came up with the chat was like, kind of going through a multi-stage build process. It'd be really, at least, my immediate thought, right, is it'd be nice if I could use a Docker file or a container file and do a multi-stage build where.
Oh yes, I wish it was possible. I spent 3 hours this week trying to find some hacky way to figure out how to do that, but it is not possible.
Okay.
What I am planning on doing is not even using a multi-stage build. One of the features that got overlooked, and this is pure incidental. I'm like 99% sure this is incidental. I talked to Valentine about it last week a little bit and I haven't had a chance to bring it up with Dan and Brent, but in a nutshell, the -- mount option is missing with Podman build. We have the -v bind mount option, but we don't have the -- mount option. The -- mount option does some really friggin' cool stuff. You can mount container images. People don't realize this. You can actually like specify a container image and then give it a mount point inside of the container that you're firing up, and it will just show up as a directory. But you're like mounting
this
another
is how you
image
do like advanced linking.
This is like
now imagine a scenario where I have a Docker file that bind mounts regular UBI. I run the yum tools, yum and RPM from the regular UBI image to add packages into the UBI micro, then do a yum clean all, and then save that extra layer. And I can do it with like 2 commands in a Docker file. Like it's not even going to be multi-stage. It'll just be like a regular Docker file.
I'm pretty sure Dan Walsh did an article or a blog post or something about doing essentially exactly that. It might have been Colin. I don't know. There was somebody who did this with Docker a long time ago. Using that exact same technique. I think when it might have been
with bind mounts. You could do it well. So you could do
when he was looking for when he hadn't built micro DNF yet. He was doing something like this. I think. Yeah, it's.
We looked at doing like I looked last week at everything. You can do a Podman mount on the UBI micro image if you want, or build a mount. Then you could like mount that into a container, and then basically install into that directory. You can do some hacky things to kind of make this, but I want it to be super elegant. I want it to be like a single build command, very simple Docker file, like, container file. I want it to be like 2-3 lines in the Docker file and a single build command. And once we add the -- mount option to the build, Podman build -- mount equal, and then you'll be able to specify containers. Then within the Docker file, we'll probably be able to do something tricky with the paths and the library paths to make sure that you can just run the yum command and it looks like it's natively installed, even though it's not. It's actually coming from the other image. But that's the plan, to kind of make that more elegant.
One thing I wanted to kind of quickly mention, just because we haven't covered this on the show, and I don't think it's commonly understood, is that Builda actually, when you do builds with Builda, it actually follows a lot more the Rocket model, which very few people have any experience with, which is that essentially you can kind of build up a container image using Builda commands, and that like feeding it a Docker file is actually almost like a secondary activity. So basically what it's doing is actually just kind of feeding that set of commands. If you're doing Docker and you don't know what you want to build, right, what you typically do is you take some sort of base image, you log into it, then you install the stuff you want and set up all the stuff you want, and then you do essentially, you go outside and do a Docker commit, right? Podman has that support as well, but if you're doing it with Builda, it's actually slightly different in that you can actually give it the set of commands that you want to build, and you will get container images along the way. So it has somewhat more flexibility about building up a container than a container file would do. The downside is that it doesn't have the ease of use that a container file distributed, right? But you can get to very, very nice, clean, quick images, essentially with a bash script instead of feeding it a container file. A container file in a lot of ways is basically a bash script, but if you use an actual bash script with builda, you can actually get to some cleaner containers. Yeah, Rocket is deprecated now. I think it is officially retired. Actually, I was just going through
it was the first CNCF thing to be sunset, whatever. I forget the term that they use.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's after graduated where it has passed,
right.
Like it's not deprecated. I don't think they called it that, but it's definitely in the sense of being worked on. No longer being worked on.
And so to be clear,
but
it's not
it does
Rocket
bring
at
some
all.
great ideas, right?
Yeah, it just follows the style of how Rocket worked. And it was interesting in the early days, right? Rocket was very much the tool of choice for sysadmins, and developers tended to focus on Docker. And so eventually they kind of came together, at least in my opinion, right? And now we have kind of builda, which gives you that really tight containers if you want them. So appealing to the kind of sysadmin side of the world, whereas developers or casual users in a sense can still use something like a container file and feed that to Podman and everything just works. You can actually feed it to builda directly, but Podman makes a nicer wrapper around it.
Yeah, and I just literally, while you guys are talking, just checked to see if the builda bud command had the -- mount option, but it doesn't, so I can't.
Yeah.
I was thinking I may have found a hacky new way to make this work.
to break it in a different, new and different way.
Yeah, nice.
But no, you asked though about REL images. So like for each of these, so REL 7, they were all REL images. They had the REL end user license agreement. There was no UBI EULA. Then we added the UBI. When we launched REL 8, we actually added a set of container images for REL 7. There were identical bits that had the UBI EULA. And then we did the same thing in REL 8 for compatibility. We left the REL 8 base images in place, just like REL 7. We don't necessarily recommend that anyone ever uses them, but we wanted them to be there just in case other layered products and some companies were building, like who knows what weird stuff. In REL 9, to be honest with you, we'll probably get rid of, there probably won't be a REL 9 image. There will only be UBI 9. It's really a matter of whether the EULA, whether we need the other EULA or not. Like, do we need the regular REL EULA for some of the container images? And some of them we did. So we ended up having both. Actually, I just remembered we made a decision that we will end up still having the REL 9 mounts. The REL 9 namespace will exist in REL 9. And that means that there will be some container images that have the REL EULA, but they won't likely be the base images at all.
Right. So
because it just confuses people.
Right. I think the audience question, which I think was JP Dade, but it could have been somebody else, was, essentially that UBI 8, right, and REL 8 seem really comparable aside from the EULA.
They're identical. They're literally identical. The only difference is a piece of metadata in one of the labels that points to the EULA. Okay. It is the only difference.
And the repositories they point to by default.
Yeah. And the that's not even how. Well, yes, because you're right. Because UBI does have an extra text file in the yum.d directory where it points to UBI, and then the REL 8 one doesn't have that. That's correct. And then, but they both in the REL channels actually come from the host, not from the image. So actually, there's nothing in the REL 8 image that's different. If you dropped the UBI text file in there, it would function identically the same, and then that one EULA is different. But yeah, you're right.
Gotcha.
You're right.
Okay. So generally speaking, the expectation is kind of go towards the UBI images is probably the right answer.
Yeah, 95% of people.
And we've done it on the show too. Is like where I'll go get a UBI image and then use stuff that is protected by the REL EULA by doing it from a subscribed REL machine, and then it works. It'd be nice if there was a way, and like one of the things that I think we're discovering around the container stuff, right? And I think Red Hat has been kind of on the forefront of trying to help with this, is like all that helpful metadata that you have around your binaries, that you get like in RPM is kind of still difficult to find in a sense in container world. So
Without
like it's really
the
hard to
RPMs,
indicate it that, you know, this UBI, you know, this image that I built or whatever, this container file isn't going to work unless you do it on a subscribed machine. There's no way for me to tell a user that without essentially a comment in the Docker or in the container file, which, you know, it's unfortunate, but it's kind of the way the infrastructure is, and we don't want to rock the you know, muscle memory boat, right, on changing how people do things.
Yeah, I've been working on expanding UBI ever since we created it, but so far REL 9, we don't really know what completely. I'm not 100% sure where we'll be with REL 9 yet. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd like to have all of REL and UBI, but we don't yet. Yeah, I mean, all I can really say on that.
Okay, never mind.
All I can say, you can ask me more. I don't know if I can answer.
No.
All right, so here's another question that did not come up today, but came up in the past, which I'm sure you get like what, I don't know, hourly basis.
Probably.
Why are UBI images so big? And then I will probably give my typical rant of why do you care? But I will hear
the
your
short answer is so Adam Samlick and I did a talk at DevConf like a month and a half ago or whatever. And Adam has been working on this for like, I don't know, 2 years, year and a half. So upstream, long story short, is container images are large because the dependency tree in REL has never been optimized to make it smaller.
Containers. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for containers and just to make it small in general. So Fedora for the last year and a half, 2 years, I don't remember the exact time frame, has had a strategic initiative, like one of their top level initiatives to like minimize. It may have been, it's been a while.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
One of their strategic initiatives to basically minimize REL, minimize Fedora, I'm sorry, because it not just for containers, but for everything, for like a CoreOS style use case, for edge use case, for all kinds of things. But it is really, really hard to go to think about how many packages are in Fedora. There's like, I don't remember, 20,000 packages or whatever. So you've got to go to every package maintainer, every subsystem team, and you've basically got to educate them on why they have to go do a bunch of work that they don't want to do. Like, you're like, it's just like everything else in the world. You're like, wait a minute, why do I got to change this? This isn't broken. Like, and you're like, oh, you should make this a soft dependency. You should do this. And you should do that. And you should and you sound like that guy. Like, you're like, you come up, you're like, you know what you need to do. You know, that's like when some guy, you're at the gas station, he comes up, he's like, you know what you need to do? Put a steel bumper on the front. You're like, I don't want to do it. I don't know why you're talking to me. Stop talking to me. Like, well, like that's how all these subsystem teams feel, right? Like, so basically Adam built this really cool tool, and he's been working on this project for a long time to like basically show people all the dependencies that get dragged in and why, and kind of get them to like open their eyes and go, oh, maybe I'm pulling in some dependencies that I really shouldn't be. And then specifically, we're working with like the glibc team to do all kinds of cool things, like pull out all the TZ data except for UTC. So all containers will run in UTC. Pull out some of these gconf character converter set things that honestly, I don't even know what they do. Like, I'm not that deep in.
It was a big deal to pull out the translations. It's like you got by default, 150 languages or something with the glibc installed.
And to do that right, you have to have separate packages in Fedora and REL. And that's why the glibc team, this is a lot of work for them, right? Like, they got to basically break their package up into a whole bunch of other sub packages. And then that adds more metadata to RPM and Yum, which then actually over time with enough patches actually slows down container builds. So like one of the other features in UBI is it only has the metadata for the latest container, and it only has the latest of everything. So like it's super fast to build compared to a REL image, because REL has to look for every version of every package, pull all that metadata down. UBI just has the latest of everything. That's one other little side benefit of UBI. But yeah, this is a lot of work. This is like years in the making to minimize a dependency tree that's been built up over 20 years. So it's
what I want to make the point here is, and the reason for this, right, or the reason why there's a bunch of competitor images that don't have this problem is because they're hand building those container images without any of this package dependency management stuff.
Some of that I agree on that. Another thing is it's a misperception. Like if you look, I have this article that's wildly popular called Comparison of Container Images. If you compare Alpine, Ubuntu, Fedora, RHEL, CentOS, blah blah blah, name another distribution, Debian, and you add Java like headless, blah blah blah, JVM, they're all about the same size. They're all about 350 megabytes. Like
once you put Java in play, it's
and that one's not even that big, to be honest with you. But like you add Apache, they're all about the same size. I mean, you add as soon as nobody runs
despite the
OS,
fact that it's small, it was smaller at the beginning. By the time you actually have a usable container, they're the same size.
They're the same size almost. And then I talk to customers and partners all the time that are embarrassed, but they're like, yeah, we have this like 1.5 gigabyte image after we add all our stuff to it. And like they kind of say it quietly like that. They go, you know, I mean, it's like 1.5 gigabytes, you know, and you're like, I mean, dude, I'm not judging, you know, like, I mean, it is what it is. Like there was this saying back in the day when I started Red Hat 10 years ago, I was a solution architect, you know, nobody runs an OS for the point of running an OS. Like nobody says, sweet, we got this $10,000 server. Let's fire up an OS and just keep it pristine and not do anything on it. Like, no, the whole point is the application. So like, a container image is small until you add an application. And then as soon as you add the actual thing that you need to do, it's going to get big. Like it's going to get way bigger. Some people, some hipsters, some cool kids, they are running like Golang binaries and C binaries. And those people have like 5 megabyte images. Good for them.
From scratch. Great.
Yeah. Build from scratch. And you got to compile every time. Great.
Basically, what it means is like if you want to have a truly small image, right, it means that you cannot leverage the support of the ecosystem.
Exactly.
And that's it has its trade-off.
That's a trade-off. Exactly.
Right. You make a choice under some if you want to go build that Java image and go build it by hand and put only the stuff in there that you want, that's fine. You know, let me know in a year when you're done with that. You know, instead of, you know, me being able to write, you know, a single line in a container file and be done. Like 100%. That's the trade-off. And sometimes it's worth it. But I think you know, as the joke is already starting in the audience, and I was thinking this too, you know, but the shaming of the container size, you know, is like, recognize what you're doing here. This is a trade press story, not a way of comparison, right? I mean, like I actually just saw an article about how the new X1 from Lenovo is too thin. Like it doesn't like it's like they're like, I'm like trading off the ability to like use my computer so that they can make the trade rags. Like this is, you know, recognize sometimes that the trade press needs things that they can measure faster, quicker, to be able to talk about it, right? But they aren't always an accurate thing to be measuring. Or
also remember, like in cars, a Ferrari is a piece of crap.
Right.
Like it costs you a lot of money. It's super fast, and it breaks all the time.
Every day. Yeah.
It has crappy interior. It's hard to get in and out. Like it is the least human. Like yes, they take great care to make this a great car, but like at the end of the day, it's really hard to make a good car when you only produce like 1,000 of them. Like a 3 Series BMW is probably one of the best cars on the planet because like there's 50 million of them, and they get all that user feedback, and it gets super refined. And like, I'll be honest with you, like an Audi A4, like a 3 Series, a C-Class, those are probably the best cars in the world because there's enough of them that you get enough feedback that they're really refined. But you get into the higher end ones, they have more quirks. Even the highest end Mercedes, you're going to get more and more quirks the higher end you get because there's not as many people using them and there's not as much time to iterate. And you're like, how many people are working on that car versus the 3 Series? Like there's probably got to be like 10 times as many people working on one that like that many people. The same is true with software.
Right. What are you doing with the car? You know, are you taking it out to the track and racing it? Okay, then go get a race car.
Then I can handle sacrifices.
Right. But if you're taking it, you know, to drive to the grocery store, like maybe
or an hour commute each way every day, that's gonna suck.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So let's see. Another question we had before the show, which is basically like, what is kind of the default security model that's going on inside a UBI image? So in other words, like what is the, you know, SE Linux configuration? What is the, you know, is the answer the same as REL, or is it tweaked somehow, or are there things that people should be aware of because they don't know that UBI has been modified in ABC way, that they should be paying attention to when they're building, you know, an image based on, say, UBI?
Yeah, this is an interesting question I get all the time. Like, so it's so funny. People are like, we need to harden the image. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, there's this perception that I get this. It's like it's like me when I buy a new car and then I got to modify it. I'm like, oh, I want to tune my Crossfire is all super modified. I changed the differential. I changed the, I've tuned the transmission, the ECU. It's like once then I do that, then I'm like, okay, now this is good. Like I get the warm and fuzzies. Like this is like my car. I can race this thing. But like it's stupid. Like for a daily driver, this is not something you need to think about. But like this is how people feel with UBI images. Like UBI images are REL images. So all the binaries are hardened with like PIA and all these other things. Like in that comparison of container images, I go through and show all the security technologies that we use to harden all the binaries that are in these container images. So first, let's back up and say containers are not real. Like they're just processes. They are just fancy processes with more constraints around them. The host is responsible for placing those extra constraints around them, not the container image. The container image is nothing more than binaries packaged in a tarball. So like, you're like, well, how do I harden these binaries packaged in a tarball? Like say that out loud. And you go, oh, I mean, I guess that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like you don't harden that. Like not really. I mean, there's a few little things people do. Like I'll admit there's things like government has requirements for message of the day, things like that. So like when you fire up a container, it literally has to have a stupid message of the day. Those kinds of things, yes, you can do things that are core build-esque to a container image. But for the vast majority of it, you can put it in, when you put the host into FIPS mode, the container, when the process runs in the container, it will be in FIPS mode. So like you, again, do that from the host. The SE Linux rules are governed by Podman, which talks to, has its own SE Linux library. And then each of the containers are fired up in their own SE Linux context. So they're automatically more isolated than any binary that you're running on a REL host. So like today, if you run 2 copies of Apache, they're run in the same context. Like they can both access the same file systems. They can access the same ports, blah, blah, blah. Like if you run them in 2 different Podman containers, they're actually ran in dynamically generated SE Linux contexts. They can't talk to each other's ports. They can't talk to each other's files. They can't talk to and nobody even notices that SE Linux is on. That in my I would say 95% of the hardening comes from the host. Maybe 5% comes from the tarball with binaries in it. Right. And when I say that, I mean in addition to whatever REL already does. Like REL does all kinds of crazy stuff to its binaries to make sure they're hardened and crazy, already. So like those binaries are pretty good. Like there's definitely work that gets done there, but there's nothing that you need to do when you buy it. It's like I just bought a tractor trailer. Like, should I put sweet rims on my tractor trailer? Like, I don't think you need to do that. Like, I think probably can carry cargo. Like, it's good. Like, like the basic things, like it can do those.
Yeah. Get a ramp for the trailer, not spinners.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of those questions that I know I'm that guy that always gets irritated when questions don't make sense, but you're like, it doesn't really make sense to think of it as hardening UBI images. Although I get that question all the time. Well, there are DoD standards for certain things, and I have been looking at. I'll confess some metadata here because since I'm a PM, but like I have been talking to some DoD people and thinking about how we might produce a DoD specific version of UBI because they have their weird requirements. I'm not even sure that I would call those actually more secure, but like nonetheless, it's just like what they want. Right. So like, and you know how that works.
That NIST standard is no joke. And
well, that was actually specifically why I like the phrasing of this question, which was not the, what do I need to do to secure a container, but instead okay, I know by default that if I go into a REL container, I can have an expectation that Red Hat has made that a secure thing. Yeah. Are there things about UBI that I should be aware of that you had to step back from that because it's lighter weight or redistributable or any of those things? And it sounds like the answer is no, but it's good to hear the answer is no, right?
Yeah. It's mostly just trust that there's REL binaries in there and it uses the same packages and there's security metadata for everything that's in there, which honestly I think is more important. The fact that you can audit and know exactly what's in there, that's important to me. Mm-hmm. To me, my sysadmin gene twitches if I don't have that.
Yeah, actually, speaking of which, I finally got confirmation from somebody we were talking about earlier, Brian Cook, that he's going to be on the show, not for a while, but eventually, that we're going to talk about the health index in the Red Hat Container Catalog, which I think is another thing that people don't kind of really look at too often. But basically everything in the Red Hat container catalog is scanned. Quay does this as well. We were talking about this on the show, but is scanned for what's in it and what's going on there. And then on the Red Hat container catalog, it gets a straight up grade as to the quality of it. When was it most
recently updated? It's trust but verify. We try to show you the verify,
right.
And what people don't, this touches on another interesting question. I'm sure we have questions around is container image scanners. So I talked to the StackRox guys already since we've made that agreement to buy them. And I've talked to a million partners of ours that already do this. Scanning software is only as good as the metadata that it's consuming or that company invents. It is a nightmare to scan container images that are built from scratch. Like when I say scratch, like a C binary that you compiled yourself, threw it in a container and tarball, basically, and then sent to somebody and be like, hey, scan this, tell me if it's secure. I don't know. I have no idea if that's secure. If you statically compile a C binary or Golang binary and send it to somebody, I will challenge them to analyze. Sure, there's decomposers and you can decompile things and look at them and analyze the decompiled code, but there's no way to truly look at a binary. Most of the time, what we actually mean is C binaries that are dynamically linked against libraries that come from a Linux distro. And now we're going and talking to that Linux distro and saying, hey, did you guys patch this CV? Did you patch this CV? Did you patch this other CV? And you go, yes, yes, yes. That's called metadata. That's Red Hat provides a ton of XML metadata that we actually transparently show people which CVs we've patched, which ones we haven't, blah, blah, blah. Most Linux distros don't even have that. They don't even have something like that. So most of the time, scanners are taking a wild ass guess about whether something's patched based on the version number. They're like, oh, look, that's a new version number, and I know it's patched upstream, so that must work.
Right. I mean, this is actually a problematic area in RHEL all the time, because people will get, basically bad, security warnings from, say, particularly RHEL 7 or a RHEL 6 library, because we backported a patch into it. So the version number hasn't changed because it still has to be backwards compatible, but wherever possible, we actually backported a CVE into it. So when you just go look at the version number, it doesn't actually tell you that the patch is there. It just tells you the version number, which, in all other regards, aside from this security problem, it has not been upgraded, right?
And it was easier to explain at the host layer. People would have to install 3-4 different Linux distros, analyze them, scan them, and do a ton of work. Now they just do podman pull, podman pull, podman pull, podman pull, run scanner. Okay, why is these different? It's a lot easier to question it, not understand it, and so you're getting a closer to a consumer level, analysis
access
as opposed to and access. So you're generating a lot more noise questions, in my opinion. That's kind of what I see happening. And the container scanner vendors, it's in their best interest to find as many red blood lights, that they can. Oh, look at our dashboard. We found all these problems. Oh, this software must be awesome. It found all these problems. Not to be cynical, but that there is some of that happening too.
Right. All right. So let's talk about points for a minute, and then I want to close with the question that that I really wanted to get to, which is, and so we'll give you, Scott, a chance to think about it for a second. Is what new feature or features or whatever that's coming down the pipe for UBI are you most excited about that we should get excited about? But before we delve into that, let's talk about our sweet internet points. And let's see, does Scott remember what the sweet internet points are from the last time you were here?
Ooh, you're going to put Scott on the spot. That's not cool.
I don't know.
So here we have our sweet internet points. The collectible points that will give you that warm fuzzy feeling inside that you are participating in something greater than yourself, and get these intrinsic value of these amazing internet points.
We are working very hard to give them some extra value.
Right. As I keep saying, we're working on the extrinsic version, but here is the intrinsic version. So Narendev at 4,900 points. Netherlands Hackham, who I saw here today, missed a show, I think. So we need to see that catching up. Noah Friction continuing going strong. Joe Fuzz, who seems to be missing in the ether. We haven't seen them in a while.
Yeah.
So we hope they come back. And then Detective Conan Kudos, definitely, making some forward progress. And we regularly talk about Fedora as well with him. And then lastly, Bacon Fork, definitely on the up and up. And then the people we featured from last time, I saw some more points getting added there. So we will feature them again in a future episode once we see their numbers continuing to go up. If you would like to collect the sweet internet points for today's episode, they are on the screen right now, and I'm going to drop them in the chat, assuming I got good links. Looks good there. Yeah. And that's our sweet internet points extravaganza for the week.
Hackham would like to remind you, or like to point out, that he did something last week, but I guess you didn't pick it up somehow.
Oh,
he'll resubmit, is what he's saying.
Okay, I'll take a look. It is occasionally I make mistakes about distributing the code. So,
right.
If you are unclear on a code,
you put the code in chat so you can track it if you want.
Right. And it's also, obviously, it's in also all the videos. So if you watch the video again, you will find the code there. So that is also how you can collect points from older shows. Or you can also, there are other ways to collect points as well. So, let me grab a link to that. But there's an activity. There's an activities page in the repo with the show notes, which I'm going to put the link in the chat, there it is, that has other ways that you can earn points as well. So we always love people earning points. I think they're a lot of fun. So, please submit them at your earliest opportunity. If you join the Discord and want the points for joining the Discord, please just private message me and I will send you the code. We don't have anything more sophisticated than that at the moment. I was talking to a Discord expert about how to kind of auto submit it, but I haven't quite connected all those dots. Discord is not
weird ways to do automation in Discord.
There's all kinds of crazy plugins for it. Like I saw a calendaring event app that I've been trying to get the hang of. It's weird. It works pretty well, except it doesn't understand 24-hour time. And I was just like, really? This seems really obvious. So actually, just by way of point in the chat, Narendev has opened a few issues, and that's part of how he has moved up in his points. And some of those ideas, actually, I think one of his ideas is what led to today's show. So that's one of the ways we try to generate new episodes, is by taking questions from the audience.
So I'm going to ask this question from JP Dade. And I'll ask it of all of us, but it was particularly focused on Scott. So, Father Linux, are you going to do the roadshow in October-November timeframe? And to be honest, folks, I don't even know where the road shows are going to be right now. So
yeah, same.
So yeah,
I don't know. It'd be fun.
It would be great, right? Like I would love to cover like Detroit or Chicago, whatever. Go help.
So I have been a little bit
drive
involved
my RV out there, meet up with the Red Hat truck.
There you go.
Side by side, we can race them. I tuned my RV.
We can show you why a Ferrari is not what you want. So I have been a little bit involved in that set or chunk of Summit. I think it's actually more like September, October. There's a bunch of cities getting set for where they're going to take place. It's going to be mostly hands-on stuff, whereas the Summit that's upcoming, like they probably have turned names, but I can't get them through my head. So
Summit Part 1 is what I.
So Summit Part 1, which is like in a week or two, is kind of mostly like keynote kind of sessions and roadmap-y stuff, things like that. Whereas Summit Part 2, which is going to be like in June, is more like traditional talks, like traditional conference talks. So a little closer to the bone, more engineering, that kind of stuff. And then the ones that JP Dade was talking about, and that I'm kind of talking about, is Summit Part 3, which is going to be physically in person. What I heard was September, October, but it kind of travels to you rather than you travel to it. So there's going to be a whole bunch of them, and hopefully there's one near your place of residence. And basically we'll run a bunch of hands-on stuff. So like labs or like, other kinds of workshops. So that's kind of the idea. And I don't know, Scott, are you, I don't know if you have anything in the pitch bucket for it. I know there's container stuff. Reason I know about it is because my lab that I've been doing for several years at Summit, which is about containerizing applications and bringing them to OpenShift, that's in the offing for it.
Well, how about this? Wherever you go, we do a road show of the Level Up Hour. How about that?
Exactly. Yeah. So so we're on the short list for labs right now. So there's, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, I have no idea. But they're only going to choose 20 of the total. So I'm still not completely in yet. So
they know who you are. You're the illustrious
hey, my lab is usually very, very popular. But I know Scott's have been in the past as well. So yes. Who knows?
I'll compete with you. That's right.
Right. Exactly.
No. Okay.
All right. So going back to the other question, what are you most excited about? What's the next thing that you are really looking forward to having land in UBI?
I'm most excited about the roadmap for UBI Micro and what else we can build using that. I think we have some, just being super transparent, we have some internal build challenges figuring out how we're going to build on UBI Micro. But once we figure that out, then I think we can build out a family of other images that are built on UBI Micro. So my fingers are crossed we can unblock things by like the RHEL 9, RHEL 8, 6 time frame and get some cool family of things going for UBI Micro. Like I'd love to get an OpenSSL image, an Apache image, an Nginx image, maybe even like eventually database images and all kinds of things that are built on that UBI Micro concept that are just really small.
It's like a nice lightweight Postgres, nice.
And then I'm excited about some of the work the glibc team is doing to try to yank out another couple megabytes here and there. Like my understanding is like we probably have a roadmap to get rid of another 12, 13 megabytes. So now we're like down to like 28 megabytes uncompressed, maybe even 25 megabytes uncompressed. And then who knows what compressed, maybe 10, I don't know. I'd be pretty happy with that. Like if we can get to that level, I'm like super stoked. Now we're getting into that Alpine size, but still using the REL content, which I think is very good quality. And then also not expand, if you use Alpine with a REL, like say you use Alpine on OpenShift, you're still increasing your attack surface, even though you don't realize it, because you're bringing in all the versions of libraries that are in Alpine that aren't in OpenShift. And so now by definition, you're adding new permutations of packages and things. So to me, UBI Micro is exciting. Like, it's different software.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the, just to give a little bit of an example, because I was involved in kind of this minimization activity 4 years ago or 5 years ago when it started.
I think I worked on this with you a million years ago.
And one of the things that was so like shocking for me in a sense is like they were talking about trying to get minimal, and part of the activity was also trying to get boot times faster, that kind of stuff as well. And one of the things that just blew my mind was how proud the Fedora team kind of in general was that we had gotten from 4 different encryption libraries that were required for boot down to 2.5. So
that's cool though. It's hard.
Right. So like why there's more than one is a little bit the challenge with open source, right? Is that there is no one who's declaring by fiat this is the answer. And it evolves over time. And so we have like encryption libraries, for example, that have been evolving over time, based on what language you're actually building your software in and all that kind of stuff. And so you kind of have this plethora of things that come out of that. But we've been making progress. Like, we're kind of coming together as a software community or open source software community about trying to solve this problem and trying to get down to, one encryption library that is used, through boot. And then maybe there's specialized use cases where you need other stuff. But, for the vast majority of it, maybe we can get to something smaller. So I think that's super interesting. I really like being able to pick up, quote unquote, off the shelf software, because especially with things like the Apache and the databases and that kind of stuff, because I trust the team at Red Hat, right, that they know how to put together an Apache, like an HTTPD, that will run and be secure and do all the right things way better than me configuring that. And so what I want to do is just pick it up and like run with it.
Use the power of multiple people's brains.
Right.
Especially
your knowledge is limited. That's one thing that you've got to remember in this space, right? Like you could build a scratch container and it can be really minimal and really clean and lean, but you have little idea of what vulnerabilities exist in there.
Well, a perfect example of this was like 10 years ago before I came to Red Hat, I was a PHP MySQL like ninja. Like we ran so much of that shit everywhere that it was insane. So like I felt pretty confident I knew how to build the best one. And I usually built it from Red Hat bits, but then I would tweak it. I would tune this. I would do that. I was getting to that level where I was like, oh yeah, this thing is warm and fuzzy. Then I come to Red Hat and I'm like farting around, sales, product management, product marketing, blah, blah. Like just last year before, I'm building a PHP MySQL thing for my blog because I'm going to confess I have not upgraded my blog and my web, my wiki for like 10 years. So and MediaWiki will do that for you. Like it'll do that for you. So I did that and I exported it all, re-imported it. It all worked, by God. I mean, it was actually amazing. But
that is amazing.
But when I went to rebuild it, I was like, what's this FPM stuff? What's this PHP FPM? What the hell is it? So I Google it. I find Remy, the guy that packaged it. I didn't even know he was a Red Hat guy. I just started reading this Remy guy's docs. I'm like, oh, I guess I should move to FPM. It's better because of this. Yeah. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's already built into RHEL. I was like, dear God, am I that out of touch? Like it had already changed in Fedora, changed upstream, but gotten pulled into RHEL, and it was all different. And I didn't even know. Like
I had
how much it had
very
changed.
Similar experience at a company I used to work for, a startup. Yeah, they were just like, wait, what is this new PHP paradigm? I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm here.
But I mean, I got out of touch. Like I was an expert, and I wasn't,
man. Yeah,
and I was like, damn it. I was like, damn it.
I used to run through MySQL databases like they were, nothing. And now if you put me on the MySQL command line, I probably couldn't get myself out of a wet paper bag. So, it's just one of those things, right?
And this is why I trust Remy. I know he knows this stuff. I'm like, dude, he built this. I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
I mean, and him as a kind of a canonical example of like lots of other people at Red Hat and kind of in the open source community in general. He not only kind of does his day job of packaging PHP and all that other jazz, he maintains an entire repo on the side that has all the stuff that he isn't comfortable putting in RHEL that you might need because, you might need it for something. But he does that in his spare time, right?
Yeah, that's free time he's using to do that. Exactly.
And so, if you ever go to FOSDEM, definitely look for him. He's a super nice French guy. He's already been trying to twist or, modify, cause whatever his son to get into the field as well. I think his son is already doing some packaging,
and everything.
Which I find hilarious.
We need to
like 16, 18, something like that.
We need to have like the Emmys of like open source. Like we need to give them an award, like an Oscar. Like here's your open source.
We could totally do that.
We should totally
right here. We could totally
we do it on the show. Yeah.
Remy deserves that. He deserves like an Oscar for his performance in 2013. Come on, that was epic.
Yeah, right, exactly. Carlos O'Donnell with glibc.
Carlos would also get an Oscar.
But if we put him on the show, obviously we would all have to dress up because I have never seen him in not a suit. Because he works remote, works from home, just like all of us are doing lately. He does it in a suit. It's amazing, and not only is it a suit, but he looks like good, like he is well dressed.
It took me like 3 months into the pandemic to just give up on anything but t-shirt and gym shorts.
Right. This is standard PM outfit, like a button-up shirt and no pants.
Right.
Exactly.
Give off the vibe of being just a hair more dressed up.
But I like this idea. I wonder how we could do it. It's like,
I think we could do like a dedicated award show and invite all the open source people, right? Like not just Red Hatters, but I'm talking like
right.
And like, an hour and a half, thank you very much for XYZ thing, and off we go. And we just
that'd be hilarious.
Pick 10, 12 people and off we go. I think we could totally do it.
I'm trying to figure out how we'd pick the 10 or 12 people though.
Oh, it would be something we do on a regular basis.
Right.
Or semi-regular basis.
There's literally a lot.
Millions.
But yeah.
Potentially tens of thousands. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. McCarty, for your time. I reiterate, follow him on Twitter, Fatherlytics. He says mostly controversial things on the internet, but they're always entertaining. So we highly recommend. Everything that he writes is worth reading. So definitely check that stuff out. Let us know if you have more questions. We can always have Scott come back. Hopefully we covered, kind of what's going on with UBI, what we're excited about, why you should use it. We'll talk about it more next time. So Chris, you want to tell us what's coming up on the channel?
So next up at 11 a.m. Eastern, if I'm reading the calendar right, 1500 UTC, we are going to be talking about day 2 operations in OpenShift. And we're actually breaking it up into multiple parts. Andrew is going to come on, and it's like day 2 operations part 1 is what's coming up. So it's kind of okay.
Day 2.1, day
right.
2.2.
Yeah. Exactly. So, day 2 operations can be extensive depending upon your environment, right? Like if you all of a sudden you're like, hey, great, I've got this OpenShift thing, but now I need it over there on that disconnected network. Yeah, that's like a whole different ball game, right? So yeah. Plain Risky wants us to have an episode when UBI Micro launches. So
that's a good idea.
Like if you want to come on and highlight that stuff, we'd more than welcome you anytime. But then later today, after the day 2 operations, we've got OpenShift Commons. We're going to be talking to my friend Baruch from JFrog, and then the scalable multiplayer game design game at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC.
Cool beans.
So, yeah,
cool
full
beans.
day of content for y'all.
And remember, we'll have Chris Wright, CTO of Red Hat, on the show next week, and then Summit soon after that. We will be dark for, I think, both Summit and KubeCon.
Yes.
There will be content on the channel, but most of it will be focused on Summit and KubeCon.
Mm-hmm. So the Summit week, we're kind of just like, okay, there's Summit, done.
Okay.
And then KubeCon week. So we have OpenShift Commons gathering, day 0 event. I'll be hosting, and that'll be on the channel during KubeCon. And then we have various community office hours that kind of line up to breaks in the KubeCon schedule, so that you don't have to feel like you're missing something that week of KubeCon. It's all on the calendar. I encourage you to check it out. Subscribe to the calendar, please. I'll drop a link to it right now. And join us for our journeys. How about that?
Exactly. Cool. I'm really looking forward to the service mesh one of the office hours. So
yes, same.
I think it'd be cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great one. Be safe out there, everyone. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, audience.
Thanks for having me. Take care.